Hello and welcome to another one of my videos. In this one, I think all of you perfectionists out there might want to put on a pair of blurry glasses, because this video is for my friends in places like Venezuela and Africa where they don't have a lot of resources, because we're going to be looking at a few tips for reusing or recycling cheap chipboard. Now the chipboard is really just glued together sawdust, really rough sawdust with a fine layer on the top, thick in the middle and fine on the other. It's compressed and you get this board. Very cheap, it's horrible stuff, but it does have its applications. Now when you're recycling it, the biggest problem you're going to get is that it gets wet, and that's why they throw it out, and then it turns all fibrous like that and it breaks apart. So you don't want that, so you got to discern what's a good piece and what's not. If it's not swollen and thin, you can use it. So other problems that you're going to get when you find your boards on the street, when they've been thrown out, they often treat them roughly and you get the edges all damaged and broken. But that's no problem. You can either cut them off and work around them, but if you can't, don't fret, just relax. Something like this is not a problem. We can fill that later on, as I'll show you later. You can fix little corners and things as well, and you can also fix bits like that. Remember, it's just sawdust with glue, so fixing it's no problem. Something like this as well, when it comes off, often the glue will rip off the fine surface and then you get a damaged surface. But once again, that's not a problem, and we'll look at that later on in the painting of it. The third problem is where you get blocks that are stuck to a relatively nice piece of timber and you get a block that you have to remove. So we'll look at how to do that also. With these ones, you get a chisel and hammer, and you're going to knock off as much of the block as you can without damaging below. Those blocks become sacrificial. Then when you've got it reasonably close, just plane off the rest of that. It's fairly quick. And there it is, almost as good as new. The inherent problems with chipboard is joining it. On the joints here, if you use nails big enough to hold it together, it's likely to, if by the edge on thin board, split this one possibly out that way, and also when you nail it in this way, it will split that because it's very weak in the fiber. And if you use nails that are smaller, they just pull out because there's not enough pressure on from the fibers to hold the nails in. So you have to use glue as well. It's mostly the glue that's holding it because the board's made of glue anyhow. Better still is to use screws, and you have to make pilot holes so once again it doesn't split out here, and also glue to hold it all together is better as well. Better still is measuring your outside dimensions so that they overlap, and you make notches. You can make several of those so that they fit in like that, and there's more strength in both ways and also more surface area around it to glue as well, so you get a stronger joint that way. Then you've got to deal with these surfaces which are not very smooth, but we can deal with those. And even better still, so that once it goes in here doesn't pull out this way, is to make that into a dovetail joint. A dovetail joint is not as scary as it seems. It's basically the same joint as that, except this angle is cut on an angle so that it won't pull through like that. So that gives it lots of strength that way, so it assembles by going down that way and will not pull out that way. So you've basically just got to cut two angles on that joint. So let's make a box just as an example. Now I've got my four sides all measured to the outside dimensions of each side. Now on the corner I'm going to put one in there on a flat surface to get the thickness of the board. Turn it around so I've got it on both sides. And do exactly the opposite on the other side. And that gives us the thickness of the board. Do all 4 corners. Let's do the tails first. Now if you've got an adjustable square, use that like this, and you're going to be making an angle outwards. The angle is not important, and even if they're equal is not important, as long as you've got an angle. If you haven't got one of those, just draw an angle somewhere there. Then cutting down the outside of that line, and down that line to take out this. So we have all of these tails. You may have a couple or two, as many as you like there. Now we're going to bring that to there, stand it up like this, and draw those reference points of where that is. Now you want to probably mark those like A to A to keep the orientation, because from here on it's important that each slot, tail, goes into each peg, into each hole. On the inside of that line there, I'm going to now follow the angle and cut down to the line. Then on the table or the floor, I'm using a chisel to go along that line. Or you could use a saw, jigsaw otherwise, come from both sides. And taking it out also from the top, and knock out that piece, clean it up with a saw or a rasp or something, and then that should just slide in there snugly if you can. But there we are. Repeat all 4 corners. So there it is structurally. Goes together. Now those joints should be snug and you shouldn't even need nails, but what happens if you're loose like this one? Remember, it's sawdust and glue. So if that's really loose, I can take a very thin wedge and just poke it down in the hole, and it will get glued, of course, so that will tighten it up. Now if this is not flush this way and that's not in far enough, I can open those up by putting a blade down there and cutting it out. Similarly, if it's not flush, if they're too low, I could also stick a blade through there and just clean that out so that it will sit down. Then I will apply glue to all of the surfaces that are going to meet, like here and here. Gluing my wedge in also and cutting it off. Now, while that glue is still wet and these ends are rough and bared, get some glue and smooth it off and force it down the cracks. And then sweep up some of your sawdust and put it on there, flatten it in and let that dry, and that will fill it. Any splits like this one, I'm going to fill, stick some glue down there, clamp it, and also put sawdust in there. This one I could have done before I glued it, but I'm still going to do it. Just getting a piece of patch material and gluing and clamping that in there. And this bit that's left over in any other holes, I can just apply a little bit more glue and sprinkle some more sawdust on, push it in, and blow it off, let it dry, and just build up that until it's the thickness I want. And remember this surface one here, well, we can run a bit of glue along that and Rub it in nice and smooth, fill in all the gaps, and then with some fine sawdust, and let that dry. Once that's dry, you can clean off any high spots with your plane. And that includes the sawdusty ones too. Build up the low spots a little bit more. Really low spots. Now, because it's chipboard, logically you're going to paint it because it's ugly unpainted. So, but we're not going to use a brush. We're going to start with a spatula. So why a spatula? Because if you use a brush, you're only going to have to paint it on and then sand it off. But if you use a spatula, you're just going to spatula the first few coats on very thinly, filling all of the imperfections and also the end grains and any lumps and bumps with the paint. What you haven't filled with the sawdust, you can now start filling with the paint. So now sanding between coats is minimal and paint application is minimal. It comes up smooth really quickly, ready for a final brush coat. So there we are, just using the spatula and some sanding, a little bit of sanding, but not as much as you would with the brush. Nice sharp edges. The grains are all disappeared on the edge fronts as well. It's all disappeared. The patches are all mended and it's nice and strong, probably stronger than a build with nails by using the dovetail joints, and now it's ready to paint it the colour that you want.